Get ready to hear some timeless historical radio broadcasts. Thank you for visiting Golden Age Radio. Listen to the complete NBC and CBS D-Day broadcasts on rebel.com/C/GAR. Support our veterans by visiting veteransradioministry.com. Let's honor their sacrifice. Thank you.
WEAF, New York.
Bible, formerly heard at this time, is now being broadcast in the morning on another network. So won't you please consult your local newspaper for time and station. You know, friends, to understand is to be tolerant. That's a lesson that Eileen Holmes, student nurse in The Woman in White, must learn. And even though she's just entered training at Municipal Hospital and will meet for the first time Helen Bradley, superintendent of nurses, Eileen encounters her first conflict today on The Woman in White.
The Woman in White, dedicated to the women of America whose responsibility is tomorrow's world. Brought to you by Betty Crocker Soup. Wouldn't you like to serve home-cooked soup without all that homework? Then get acquainted with the Betty Crocker packaged soup, the vegetable noodle soup ingredients. This product was developed by Betty Crocker and her famous gold medal cooking staff, and it's truly an aristocrat among packaged soups. To make your soup, here's all you do. Just empty the package of Betty Crocker ingredients, vegetables, noodles, seasonings, into boiling water. Add butter or meat drippings, and let simmer. Now, isn't that easy? And the soup is delicious, full of garden, fresh vegetable goodness, rich with creamy noodles. Try it, and soon, won't you? The Betty Crocker Vegetable Noodle Soup. Better get 3 packages today. And now, The Woman in White.
Look here, Helen, it's you who are being unreasonable. And I believe in this instance rather ridiculous. No matter what you say or try to do, you can't change things. Do you understand? You can't change
Could
things.
you please lower your voice? I can hear you. It isn't necessary to shout.
But do you understand? Have I made myself clear?
Quite clear. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave.
I'm not leaving until I get some sort of an answer.
I gave you my answer. If it doesn't satisfy you, I'm sorry. I told you a few moments ago that you're keeping me from the graduation exercises. Now, there's nothing further for me to say. So if you'll pardon me, I should be in the auditorium. Of course, I wouldn't expect you to appreciate that.
Under the circumstances, no. You're back from your vacation earlier than you were expected.
Oh, I see. Then you were here during my absence.
Yes. I was told you were away and weren't due back until the end of the week. No, Helen. It isn't necessary for you to see your girls, as you call them, receive their caps.
Either you leave this room or I will.
I wouldn't if I were you.
I could have you
But you won't.
I'm sorry, Miss Bradley.
Oh, why, Dr. Burton.
I couldn't help overhearing some of your conversation. If you're being annoyed...
Mr. Hill was, just leaving.
Goodbye, Miss Bradley. Perhaps we can continue our conversation at some other place. At a more convenient time for both of us.
Come in, Miss Holmes.
Oh, I didn't know there was anyone with you.
Miss Holmes, this is Miss Bradley, our superintendent of nurses. I didn't know you'd have the pleasure of meeting her on your first evening at Municipal Hospital.
How do you do? How do you do, Miss Holmes? You said, Doctor, this was her first...
Yes, Miss Holmes is entering training.
I don't remember her application, but then I've been away for several weeks. Did Mrs. Martin okay it?
Yes.
Won't you sit down? Thank you.
Miss Holmes comes highly recommended. I'm sure that you'll find her record quite satisfactory. Oh, and by the way, she's from my hometown.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh. After you've gotten her settled, would you mind stopping in at my office?
You'll be here for a time yet?
Yes.
Very well, Doctor. I'll see you later, then.
You needn't worry about anything now, Miss Holmes. Miss Bradley's in charge, and I'm sure that she'll be able to make you feel quite at home.
Well, thank you, Dr. Burton.
I'll be seeing you around.
Good night, Doctor.
Good night.
Now, supposing you tell me something about yourself, Miss Holmes. There really isn't much to tell, except that I want to become a nurse. Obviously, or you wouldn't be here. You realize, of course, that the nursing profession isn't an easy one. There's a great deal of hard work connected with it. Responsibility. The period of training is trying and difficult. But for those who sincerely want to be of service, I think I can safely say that the profession can't help but be gratifying. It doesn't necessarily pay back in dollars and cents, but there's the personal satisfaction of helping people who are ill. Come to a hospital for care, for treatment. And understanding and sympathy, I might add. What I'm trying to say, Miss Holmes, is that there isn't any glamour or any romance attached to this profession, as some few young women are apt to think. Oh, I'm sure I haven't any false impressions, because I've had what you might call first-hand experience. You see... First-hand experience? I've been a patient on several occasions. I know the qualifications of a real and fine nurse. She happened to be one of your own nurses, Miss Adams. Karen? You knew Karen Adams? Oh, yes. Dr. Burton did say that is, during the epidemic. Yes, I see. And she looked after you, hmm? I was her last patient, before she contracted the disease herself. Well, then it was she, shall I say, who might be the reason for your entering training. Yes, Miss Bradley. During my illness, I don't believe I once heard her say that nursing was difficult or demanding. To her, it was a great adventure. An adventure in life and death, with its tragedy and its comedy, too. I don't mean to sound disrespectful, Miss Bradley. What you said to me, I suppose, is more or less customary. I'm very sorry, Miss Holmes, if you feel that I've been misrepresenting. That isn't my feeling at all. Only, well, perhaps I'm the one at fault. Because it so happens that I've been more in touch, not only with the nursing profession, but with the medical profession as well, more than the average girl who enters training. When I was just a youngster, I made calls with my father. Helped him now and then. Your father was a doctor? Is a doctor. I see. And a very good one. You're a little sensitive, aren't you, Miss Holmes? Perhaps. I advise you to get over that rather quickly. I'm sure in time I will, Miss Bradley. We seem to have gotten off on the wrong foot, which really was quite unnecessary. You're evidently tired. Suppose we call a truce and get you settled for the night, hmm? I'm sorry if I said it. No, that's quite all right. Perhaps it was my fault, having been somewhat on edge when you came in. I do want you to understand. Being a nurse, and a good nurse, is very important to me. And I don't want you to think... I won't. You only arrived today? This evening. My train was late. I should wire Doc. I'd forgotten completely. I promised I'd let him know that I arrived safely. Is there any way? Oh, yes, I have the desk at Western Union for him. I'd appreciate that very much, Miss Bradley. Miss Frank, will you get Western Union on the phone for me, please? Yes, thank you. May take a few minutes. So your father's a doctor, hmm?
Well, he actually isn't my father. I mean, well, I've lived with him ever since I was a baby. My parents were killed in an accident.
Oh. Well, then this doctor adopted you.
No, he didn't.
And you never knew about your real parents? Hmm?
I know a great deal about them. Dr. Purdy knew them quite well.
Dr. Purdy?
Yes.
Name sounds familiar.
Perhaps you've heard Dr. Burton speak of him.
Yes, perhaps.
And he's been in the papers. Well, in the local papers, anyway. His name's been mentioned for the fine work he did during the epidemic.
Yes? Yes. Oh, just a minute. Western Union is home.
Oh, thank you. Hello? This goes to Dr. Robert Purdy, 310 South 1st Street, Oakview, Iowa. Dear Dad, arrived safe and sound. Train 6 hours late. But I'm here, and everything is wonderful, just as I knew it would be. Write soon. All my love. Sign it, Eileen.
Well, I guess that takes care of everything, Miss Holmes. I hope you'll be comfortable, and I'm sure that after a good night's rest, you'll be ready to start in the morning. Good night.
Good night, Miss Bradley.
Yes? Well, come in, Helen. What in heaven's name took you so long?
Oh, Burton, wherever did you find this girl?
Eileen, you mean? Well, I didn't find her, Helen. She just... Well, she just happened, that's all.
Yes. If that's the way she impressed me, she just happened.
There was a pause. Neither the superintendent of nurses nor Dr. Burton spoke. And then words that more or less surprised the doctor. Words from the lips of Helen Bradley.
She's going to need some looking after, Paul. A great deal of looking after.
You are listening to The Woman in White. When the famous Betty Crocker gives her own name to a product, as she's done with that new packaged soup, Betty Crocker Vegetable Noodle Soup Ingredients, well, you can be sure that this product's about the best of its kind your money can buy. So when buying packaged soup, naturally you choose, don't you, the Betty Crocker quality, the soup tested and approved by Betty Crocker and her staff of cooking experts? Is it on your grocery order today? Betty Crocker Vegetable Noodle Soup Ingredients. And now, here is your host again, Ed Prentice.
Thank you, Bob. Eileen Holmes, a student nurse, an individualist, keeps before her always the image of Karen Adams, a Florence Nightingale, hopes to follow in the footsteps of all women in white. The wonderful profession, nursing. We all know how much nurses are needed, today more than ever. Young girls who are graduating this June from high schools all over the country should stop and think for a moment before making their decisions for the future. Your daughter can enter no finer profession than that which Eileen has entered, the profession of the woman in white. Well, this is Ed Prentice, your host on the General Mills Hour. See you tomorrow.
We now invite you to join a nationwide audience to sing and to enjoy the best-loved hymns of every faith, hymns of all churches, which follows immediately after a special news bulletin.
This is Don Hollenbeck. We delay our program momentarily for some invasion bulletins from the NBC newsroom in New York. A spokesman for the German government admits officially that the Allied beachhead in France is 21 miles long and 6 miles deep. Berlin radio says that between 2 and 5 new Allied divisions, 75,000 more men, were landed in France last night. Just a moment ago, Berlin broadcast that an entire Allied airborne division has been landed on the west coast of Normandy. NBC monitors heard a German broadcast 1 hour ago admitting that Nazi troops had given up the town of Bayeux, 6 miles inland on the Cherbourg Peninsula. And DNB reports 100 Allied tanks are attacking today near the village of Caen, 9 miles inland from the sea. General Eisenhower's noon communique states German forces have been cleared from all beachheads in France. From Italy, the bulletin that Allied forces are now 40 miles beyond Rome at Civitavecchia. This news came to you from the NBC newsroom in New York.
Welcome to Hymns of All Churches, brought to you by General Mills, which we today dedicate to that greatest undertaking of all times, the invasion of Fortress Europe. As we gather to sing, our sons and brothers, yes, fathers and husbands too, are making an heroic attempt to wrest the continent of Europe from the hands of the marauder. In this solemn hour, join us as we pray that God give them strength and courage to carry on, and that we in turn may be inspired to a fuller realization of the responsibilities which rest with us. We sing next one of the loveliest hymns in our repertoire, the Catholic favorite, Mary Help Our Valiant Soldiers, a touching plea to the Virgin Mary for the safety of our boys, sung to the ever-lovely music of Mother Dearest, Mother Fairest. Our soloist today is Kenneth Morrow.
Mary, help our valiant soldiers. Among the great writings of all time, none is more comforting, no more reassuring than the 23rd Psalm. For centuries, people the world over has turned to it for inspiration and courage at crucial moments. And so today, we turn to it again. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. As we near the close of our broadcast, it is the sincere hope of all of us on Hymns of All Churches that our hymns today have brought you comfort and strength. In the difficult but triumphant days that lie ahead, let us remember that when our cares become too heavy to bear, we can always turn to Him and pray. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, Be thou our guard while troubles last, and our eternal home.
Now, friends, with the invasion so much on our minds, naturally, we're all talking about it. It's the most important thing in our lives. But please, when we talk, let's remember this. Careless talk costs lives. Our enemy is clever. He hopes we aren't. He hopes we'll tell in a bus or a restaurant or to someone who'll repeat it some little piece of information that he wants. He hopes we'll talk about our letters from men in the service and repeat what they said. And those of us who are in war work, yes, he hopes we'll let out some of the things we know about our work. But let's fool him, please. The enemy has big ears. He hopes we have big mouths. Let's show him he's wrong. Let's think before we speak. Let's remember that careless talk costs lives.
p.m. GRUEN, Gruen Precision Watch Time. See the Gruen very thin. WEAF, New York.
This program may be interrupted to bring you the latest war bulletins.
Ivory Snow presents A Woman of America. Ivory Snow brings you the story of Prudence Dane, a woman of America whose courage and faith are the glorious heritage of all women of America today. Today, A Woman of America is happy to have as its guest Lieutenant Commander John Kilgrew of the United States Maritime Service, enrolling officer in New York City, who is here to tell us something about that fine branch of the service.
Thank you, Mr. Gallup. First, I'd like to remind your listeners that the Merchant Marine offers a fine career and opportunity for service to young men, especially those between the ages of 16 and 17 and a half. Our merchant service, Marine, has some of the finest new ships in the world. And today, more than ever, crews are needed to man them, now that the long-awaited invasion of Europe is underway.
Well, safety measures are excellent in the Merchant Marine, aren't they, Commander?
Yes, our merchant ships, sailing in convoys, are protected by both Navy and Air Force escort, and in addition, each vessel carries a well-trained gun crew.
Well, what about chances for advancement?
Why, they're excellent. After 14 months at sea, a man can apply for officer's training. Of course, all enrollees get a thorough training course before they ship out, and their beginning pay is from $80 a month up, with practically everything clear, including free medical and dental care.
Now, who is eligible for the Merchant Marine, Commander Kilgrew?
Men from 16 to 17 and a half, and from 26 to 35 and a half. Stewards may be enrolled up to 50 years old. All those interested should apply now to their nearest U.S. Maritime Service office, or write to the U.S. Maritime Service, Washington 25, D.C.
Thank you, Commander Kilgrew. And remember, friends, for more information about the Merchant Marine, write the U.S. Maritime Service, Washington 25, D.C. Authorized in 1806 by an act of Congress, our then young and struggling federal government undertook the building of a national road to lead west over the mountains that isolated the Atlantic seaboard from the rest of America. Extended in 1825 to the Mississippi River, in the decades that were to come, it proved itself a deciding factor in our national life by making the people see the value of centralized government. Along its entire length rumbled the heavy Conestoga wagons loaded with freight and produce, named, like the breed of horses that drew them, from the place of their origin, Conestoga County, Pennsylvania. Always the road pointed like a beckoning finger to the rich vastness of the uncharted west that lay beyond. But its most precious cargo was the people. People by the thousands, like Prudence Dane and Wade Douglas, like all those of the little Dane caravan who traveled its length and beyond. And so it was that night in June so many years ago, as Prudence quietly closed the door of Wade's cabin and started across the moonlit compound of the frontier outpost of Fort Donaldson.
Prue, come back here.
Good night, darling. Come and have breakfast at my cabin in the morning. Oh, dear God, please. He must see that valley once more before it happens. He must. He loves it so. And I promise I'll do my part. Nothing, not even our marriage, shall delay the start. Only let him see that valley. Let him ride with the wind on his face, a whole man, across it once more. In Christ's name, amen.
Forgotten is the hurt Prudence felt when Wade placed the date of their wedding second to the start of the wagon train. But she realizes full well how closely interlocked are the two events in Wade's mind. A great peace descends over her, and a few minutes later, she comes to her own darkened cabin. And as she pushes open the door...
Prue, is that you?
Yes, Peg, it's me. Oh, I'm sorry I awakened you.
I wasn't asleep. Oh, there's a candle and matches there on the table.
I don't need them. I can see well enough by the moonlight.
How's Wade feeling? Wasn't it just wonderful the way he walked in on the meeting tonight? Didn't you just love it?
It was dramatic, wasn't it?
And isn't it marvelous that the wagon train's getting started day after tomorrow?
Yes.
Oh, you should have heard Emmy. You'd have thought Wade had said we were going to start for the moon.
I can just hear her.
She says she just can't possibly get ready. Well, not in less than a week.
And Emmy will be the first one to be packed, though. You watch and see.
What did the doctors say about Wade, Prue? Was he angry because he got up?
Jim wasn't very pleased about it, but wasn't much he could do. Didn't seem to hurt Wade a bit.
Oh, I'm so glad. You know you're awfully lucky to have him in love with you, don't you, Prue?
I know, Peg. And I'm very grateful.
Prue?
Yes?
Are you going to be married before the wagons start? Are you, Prue?
No. No, we're not, Peg.
But why not? I thought you said...
I know I did, but That was before I knew we'd be starting so soon. You see, there's so much to be done.
But you've got your dress.
I was thinking things that have to be done till the caravan can start. We'll all be too busy to worry about anything else.
Oh, Prue.
I mean it, Peg. Nothing must delay the start. Every last one of us must do all we can to help. Nothing is more important than that.
Don't you call getting married important?
Compared to the start of the wagon train, no. You see, Peg, if we were living back east, in a town somewhere, the wedding would be important. But in a wagon train, nothing takes precedence over the common good of all. So, whatever my personal feelings might be, they'll have to be put aside. At least, until the wagon train gets underway.
But behind Prue's voice, there was a haunting note of wistfulness, of longing, that belied her brave words. In the morning, when Wade came for breakfast, she gave him no hint of what might lie behind her calm gray eyes. Breakfast over, Wade went about his work around the camp. There were wagons to be checked, problems to be settled. So many things, and so little time in which to do them. Now the sun is almost overhead as Wade approaches Tom Hatfield, who is busy at his wagon.
Hello, Tom. How's it going?
Oh, hello, Wade. Say, I'm glad you came up. There's something I want to ask you.
Yeah, sort of hot, ain't it? Go ahead, Tom.
Well, every last one of us brought along an awful load of farm tools, plows and such like, and they take up a plague lot of room in the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
Room we could use for other things. I was wondering how this would strike you. Suppose we took the iron parts off and just kept them. Then, when we got to where we're going, we made new wooden pieces. What do you think, Wade?
Well, I was just thinking you might have something there, Tom. Of course, I wouldn't want to see everybody do it.
Oh, no. We might need them along the way. Keep, say, 4 or 5 all set up and strip all the rest.
Well, talk it over with Will, Tom. See what he thinks. If he's for it, then you go ahead.
All right.
Anything else giving you any trouble?
Only Em. She swears she can't have the household stuff ready in time. But you know how Em is.
I bet you'll be the first to be ready. I got to get on, Tom. See you later.
Sure, Wade, and mighty good to have you up and around.
I'm glad of it myself, Tom.
I tell you, Judy, I heard it with my own ears.
Honestly, Anne?
Sure.
Oh, I think it's wonderful.
Oh, you women are all alike. You mentioned the word marriage to you, and... Oh, hiya, Wade.
Hello, Bob. Judy, Miss Hawkins.
Hello, Wade.
Well, it sure is mighty nice to see you up and walking around the way, Douglas. We'd almost given you love.
Oh, you can't kill a tough old buzzard like Wade.
No, not much chance of that, Bob. How are things going?
Oh, say, by golly, Wade, I'm glad you came by. I want to talk
What's
to you
all
about...
this I've been hearing about you and Prue Dane, Wade? Is it true?
Yes, Wade. Annie was just telling us.
Is it really true, Wade? Are you and Prue going to get married?
Well, I guess it is, Bob. At least Prue said yes.
When, Wade?
What to tell you, Judy?
I'm only hoping now that she doesn't change her mind.
Well, there's not much danger of that, Wade. Will you accept our congratulations?
Why, thank you, Judy.
And mine, too, Wade. Prue's one of the finest women in the world.
Thank you, Ann. I know that.
All right, you two. Now that you've pinned him down and found out what you wanted to know, how about leaving us alone to discuss something important, huh? You know, we do have to get this wagon train ready to start.
We'll go and leave you alone. But congratulations, Wade.
And from me, too, Wade.
Thanks, both of you. See you later.
What did I tell you, Judy? I knew what I was talking about.
Congratulations, Wade.
Thanks.
But it'll be all over camp in another half an hour. You know how Ann Hawkins is.
Thanks, Bob. What was it you wanted to ask me about?
Oh, yeah. Say, Wade, I've been checking on supplies, and by golly, Slim was right. None of us have got any too much in the way of food. Did you know that?
Oh, I knew we were sort of low, but I don't think we got anything to worry about. Like I said, we'll be in the buffalo country soon. There's lots of antelope.
Yeah, I know, but we can't just live on game. It's flour and sugar and coffee and salt and things like that.
Oh, wait, Douglas. Who's that calling? Oh. Yes, Slim, what is it?
Run over. Caleb wants to see you.
All right, I'll be right over. Oh, don't worry too much, Bob. We'll make out.
Sure hope so, but I don't see how.
Then I'll go see what Caleb's got in his mind. I'll drop back a little later.
Okay, Wade. If you say not to worry, I won't.
I didn't mean to drag you away from Bob, Wade. Slim here just yelled at you without thinking much.
That's all right. I was through.
What's on your mind?
Oh, well, Wade, you know Slim and me spoke of the food being kind of short.
Last night over at your cabin?
Yeah, I remember. Bob and me was just talking about it.
Well, I don't think it's much of a worry after all.
Nah.
What made you change your mind?
You remember when we all went back to Independence?
Yeah, if you remember, I bought quite a supply of victuals myself, with my own money.
I'll say you did.
How much extra have you got?
Oh, I'd say maybe a couple of tons. Wouldn't you say so, Slim?
Easy that much, Caleb.
I ain't got room for it all in my wagon, so if any of the others want any, they're welcome to it, Wade.
Well, that's mighty nice of you, Caleb.
They're welcome as the stars that shine, Wade. Like I said, I can't haul it all.
Well, actually, Bob was just telling me he was sort of worried. Why don't you go have a talk with him?
I sure will. We'll go right over. Come on, Slim. I reckon Wade's got plenty to do without standing here talking to us. I'll see you later, Wade.
Yeah, sure, Caleb.
Caleb, I don't know how you can keep your face so solemn and straight. I swear I don't.
It's a gift, Slim.
You reckon he suspected anything?
Not him. He's too dumb. He actually dug up a prospect for our little scheme. Well, come on. We got to work fast. We got to get all them supplies sold before night. And at 3 times what I paid for them.
So Caleb begins with his plan to bring as many of the wagon train into his power as rapidly as possible. In the press of getting the wagon train started, Wade has unwittingly aided him. And yet the people of the caravan may not be willing to pay the high prices Caleb plans to ask. But if not, will they be forced to travel the balance of the way on short rations? Well, there until tomorrow, we leave the story of a woman of America. Listen then, won't you? This is Frank Gallup reminding you, for speedier dishwashing, for snow white hands, buy wonderful Ivory Snow. S-N-O-W. Be sure to listen again tomorrow when Ivory Snow brings you A Woman of America. Please save every drop of your used kitchen fat. It can save a soldier's life as ammunition or military medicine.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
For a wash that's white without bleaching, use Oxidol with its lively, active Hustle Bubble Sub. Oxidol's own Ma Perkins. Can you tell me where I can find a woman to do my weekly washing? Mrs. Margaret Bone of 1310 West Van Buren Street in Phoenix, Arizona, writes that a great many women have asked her that question. Well, with so many women doing war work today, washwomen are hard to find. So Mrs. Bone always answers no. But then she cheers the women up by telling them how they can do their own washing and get their clothes really beautifully white. Mrs. Bone tells them to use the laundry soap that she uses, Oxidol, because Oxidol washes clothes white without bleaching. Now, Mrs. Bone proves her point by showing the women some Oxidol-washed sheets that are on display in her little linen shop. And she tells them that Oxidol washed the sheets that white without bleaching. So, washwoman or no washwoman, if you want to get your clothes brilliantly white, take Mrs. Bone's tip and try Oxidol yourself. You'll discover that Oxidol can wash your clothes brilliantly white. Yes, white without bleaching. Oxidol can do that because Oxidol's Hustle Bubble Suds are so lively and energetic They lift dirt out. That's why clothes come clean without hard rubbing. Why sheets and towels, all your white things, except maybe for fruit stains or such, come white without bleaching. Gleaming white. And active as they are, those suds are genuinely safe for wash colors and rayons. So get that famous orange and blue bullseye package of Oxidol. And next wash day, see how Oxidol washes your clothes white without bleaching. Last night, I began thinking about a talk that Ma and Evie had just yesterday about Gary Curtis. Evie didn't get very far with Ma. But today is Ma's heavy day at the Red Cross, and Evie knows that. So Evie has taken this opportunity to stop by Ma's house to see Fay. We find the two sisters seated out on the front porch as Evie is saying,
I talked to Ma yesterday, Fay. Ma doesn't see this at all. I wanted to know how you felt about it.
I don't know what to think, Evie.
Well, Fay, you've got to make up your mind sooner or later. It may as well be right now.
I can't believe Gary took that money, Evie. $32,000.
You do love Gary, don't you, Fay?
Yes. Yes, I do love him, Evie.
Well, Fay, it's a question of who you love most. Ma or Gary.
Ma or Gary?
Fay, we've got to protect Ma from herself.
I don't understand, Evie.
Ma's going to believe that Gary didn't take that money, isn't she?
Of course.
What if he did?
Oh, but Evie...
I still say, what if he did?
But he didn't.
Now, wait. You're being just like Ma, Fay. You're blind.
Oh, Evie, I'm not blind. Gary couldn't have taken that money. He wouldn't have. I'd never believe in 1,000 years Gary Curtis would ever touch a penny that didn't belong to him. Evie, I know Gary better than you do. After all, he's lived right here in the same house with Ma and me. And I know Gary. I know him. I could believe a lot of things about him, but I'd never believe he was dishonest, Evie. Ma knows people. You know she does. Even before I ever liked Gary, Ma accepted him as wholeheartedly as she ever accepted anybody. Evie, what do you know about Gary? Nothing. I've seen Gary at some time or other every day since he's been in Rushville Center. And even if I'm wrong, could Ma be wrong? Could we both be so awfully wrong, Evie?
Fay, you've known Gary for how long?
3, 4, 5 months. Ever since he's been in Rushville Center.
Who was he? Where did he come from? Before that?
Why, he was in the Army.
Before that? Before he was in the Army, what did he do?
Why, I don't know.
You see, Fay, you don't know anything at all about Gary. You just think you do. You haven't the slightest idea where Gary Curtis was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or what he was doing then, or anything about him. You're not reasoning, Fay. You're being emotional. And this is one time you can't let your emotions run away with you. And neither can I. If I let my emotions sway me, I'd be perfectly blind to everything, too. That's what Ma's doing, just like you are. Because Gary's a nice young man. He's good-looking, and from all I've heard about him, he's contradictory enough to keep a girl interested. Gary's got lots of good points, Fay. But I still say that neither you, Ma, nor I, or Willie, or Shuffle, or anybody know anything about Gary Curtis.
Evie, what are you trying to get me to do?
Fay, we've all talked it over. Willie and Shuffle and me. We're not going to let Ma get herself involved in this. Because we think enough of Ma, that's why. And the least we can do for Ma is to let her see this thing logically. But you're standing in the way.
I'm standing... Evie, you...
I know, little sister, it's asking a lot of you. But you've got to think of Ma. It's very possible that Ma's thinking more of your being close to Gary than she's thinking of Gary himself. I don't think Ma realizes that herself. $32,000 is missing. That's a lot of money. That money wasn't missing before Gary started to work at the Surlock plant. Why, this thing can be the biggest scandal Rushville Center's ever known. Do you want Ma connected with it?
No.
Fay, don't think this is easy for me. It isn't easy at all. I'd rather do anything than to have to ask you to do this. But you do it for Ma. Wouldn't you do it for Ma? Wouldn't you? I'd do anything for Ma. You know that, but... Say, you've been accustomed to doing everything Ma says. Being the youngest and living here with Ma, that's only natural. But I'm older than you are. I know what I'm asking you, and I know it's for the best. I've got a good reason, Faye, a reason I haven't even told Ma. I can't tell her, not yet. And I can't tell you either. But I'm going to ask you to believe me and trust me. Believe that I know what I'm talking about. Won't you do that? Oh, I believe you, Evie, but think it over. But think it over without talking to Ma. Naturally, Ma's going to be thinking of you. And Ma's going to feel she should stick by Gary because of you. But Ma isn't going to realize that. But you do. And you've got to reason this thing all out by yourself, Faye. And not depend on Ma. Even though she doesn't realize it, Ma's depending on us. On you and me. And we can't let Ma down. Now, what are you going to do about it? I'll think it over, Evie. I'll think it over.
Peculiarly enough, Evie seems to have taken for granted that Gary is guilty. What is it that makes Evie so convinced? Who? And what is it that Evie can't tell either Faye or Ma? But now we turn our attention to the office of Augustus Pendleton at the bank. It seems the banker is just completing a long-distance call.
Yes, confounded operator. If you've got Fort William on the line, just give me the hotel. That's all I want. Well, then connect me. Don't just say you will. Hello. Room 618, please. Hello. Clint? Augustus. Look, Clint, I just called to tell you everything is going along according to plan. Smooth as silk, Clint. I've got everything working just the way I want it to. Now, Clint, that's just what I was afraid of. You stay where you are. Don't think of coming back here till I tell you to. I've got just a few little details and one big one to work out, Clint. The most important is yet to come. Pardon me just a minute. Oh. Somebody just came in. I'll call you back. But it'll only be a few days more. That I assure you. 2 or 3 at most. Goodbye. Confound it, Matilda. Can't a man even talk on the telephone in his own office? Bad enough at home. You have to just open the door and walk in like that without knocking?
Oh, Augustus, you and your telephone calls.
Ye gods, I can't even make a phone call without looking up and seeing you.
The phone call shouldn't be so confidential, Augustus. I was downtown, just thought I'd stop by. Aren't you glad to see me?
Huh.
Oh, it's such a warm day, Augustus. You shouldn't get your blood pressure up like that. Isn't good for you.
What you want to see me about?
Well, can't a wife stop in at a husband's office? Does she have to have a reason?
What is it? I haven't looked lately. Is your account overdrawn again?
No, not this time, Miss Sweet. I was thinking of giving a dinner party, Augustus.
What's the purpose of the dinner party?
Same purpose. Gary Curtis.
Oh, ye gods, are you back to that?
Well, I never was away from it, Augustus.
I've told you Gary Curtis is not coming into my home.
Yes, I remember you did. That's why I thought I'd better mention it to you before I send out the invitations. Augustus, I'm not going to let Faye Perkins have Gary Curtis for her exclusive own. It's the reason why Gary isn't seeing Gladys. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to give them a chance to patch up whatever differences they might have. And I'm going to have a dinner party, and I'm going to invite Gary Curtis.
Oh, you are?
Yes, I am.
And what brought on this sudden decision, might I ask?
I see you so little around the house lately. I have to come down here to get an opportunity to talk to you. That and the fact I just met someone down the street. Are you interested in who I just met, Augustus?
Who?
Jeffrey Powell.
Jeffrey Powell?
Yes. Gary's father, you know. And Jeff's just as interested in Gary finding the right girl as I am. From all the indications, Jeff agrees it should be Gladys. Well, I thought it would be a good idea if Jeff and I discussed the situation. So I invited him to drop by the house tonight. I thought I'd tell you in case you're not going to be home as usual lately. Any objections, Augustus?
Why, none at all, Matilda. Do, by all means, have Mr. Powell drop by the house anytime you like. And I'll be wanting to talk to Mr. Powell myself very soon. You might think that over, Matilda, and worry about it. Now, will you kindly run along and let me attend to my business?
And Jeffrey Powell is not only the father of Gary Curtis, but also the man of Matilda Pendleton's past. And Matilda eyes her husband in wonderment. Wonder so plainly written in her face, it's possible to read Matilda's thoughts, almost as if we were hearing them voiced in Matilda's own words.
Wants to talk to Jeff himself. About what? What does he mean by that?
And, of course, we wonder, too. Why don't you tell women more about how good Oxidol is for dishwashing? Lots of Oxidol users have written in to ask that question. Now, if you're using Oxidol on wash day, you already know how Oxidol washes clothes white without bleaching. So, doesn't it stand to reason that a soap that good at laundry should work wonders on greasy dishes, too? Actually, Oxidol makes grease vanish. Yes, Oxidol's hustle bubble suds are so lively and active, they dissolve grease. And naturally, suds that active last and last. Now, they're active, but not strong or harsh. Plenty of women who use Oxidol every day have hands so soft and smooth that any woman could be proud of them. Try Oxidol on tonight's dishes and see for yourself how it dissolves stubborn grease. Well, tomorrow, Matilda offers interference. Be listening to Ma Perkins tomorrow. Until tomorrow, then, this is Charlie Warren saying so long. And remember Oxidol, won't you?
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
.30 p.m. Eastern Wartime. WEAF, New York.
This is Elmer Peterson. We delay our program momentarily to bring you late invasion bulletins. A German broadcast from Berlin said German coastal batteries have beaten off an Allied landing attempt off Le Havre this afternoon. There is no Allied confirmation. Heavy fighting continues around the rail junction of Caen on the Cherbourg Peninsula, where a German counterattack with tanks, undoubtedly drawn from local reserves, has been beaten back. Nearly 500 flying fortresses and liberators, escorted by fighters, have attacked a number of road junctions south of Caen, a further indication that we are out to wreck German communications on and to the Cherbourg Peninsula. And a late German report says an entire Allied airborne division has been landed on the western coast off the Normandy Peninsula, indicating we may be planning a pincer drive against Caen. In Washington, the War Department has disclosed that the American general who was demoted for violating security regulations was Major General Henry J. Miller, commander of the 9th Air Force in Britain. This news has been brought to you from the NBC newsroom in New York.
The following program may be interrupted to bring you the latest war news.
Pepper Young's Family, brought to you by Cam-A, the mild beauty soap for a smoother, softer complexion. And now, Pepper Young's Family, written by Elaine Carrington. Friends, it's late in the afternoon, and the Bradley twins and Nancy are still at the Young house. Not only have the twins had their lunch there, but they've had their afternoon nap there, too. Now Mrs. Young and Nancy are on the porch, watching the babies dig with spoons in a patch of earth. Nancy is saying, with a sigh,
Guess it's time to take the imp home.
Oh, don't go just yet. Can't you wait until Sam gets here so we can have a look at the twins?
Oh, no, I shouldn't, Mary. I should be firm and go home right away so I can start their supper now and get to work on Kurt.
But you can't go yet. The twins are having such a good time. Look at your Mary making some kind of a pie and trying to get Kurt to eat it. Look at her. Mary, darling, take that dirt out of your mouth. Don't try to eat that nasty brown dirt.
I better go down and stop this. I knew it was too good to last.
I'll lend a hand.
No, Mary. No, dear. You mustn't eat the dirt.
It didn't taste good, did it, darling? That's right. Spit it all out. Oh, she's not a bad girl either, Kurt. Just because you have sense enough not to put mud in your mouth doesn't mean you have to scold your sister for doing it.
No, that's right.
Nothing, Hattie. She just made herself a mud pie to eat, and it didn't taste so good.
Oh, well, now you two little tykes come on inside. I've got your supper ready for you. I've cooked some nice cereal, and I made some pudding, too.
Oh, no, Hattie. I'm taking them home, dear. You shouldn't have done that.
Oh, but it's time for their supper.
And besides, Hattie loves fussing over them, so you may as well relax, Nancy.
All right, twins. Go along with Hattie. I'll tote you home afterwards.
Come on.
Hattie, here, I'll carry Mary
Oh,
out.
thank you, Mrs. Bradley.
No, she can walk, but she loves to be carried.
Look at Kurt scorning all help. Oh, Nancy, that darling. Now you two go inside with Hattie.
Sometimes they're darling. Here we are.
Come along, twin pal. Come on inside. Eat supper.
Oh, sit down, Nancy, dear.
Thanks. Mary, you know, this is the height of luxury, to be able to sit here on the porch another half hour and rock.
You know, Nancy, I just enjoy rocking. I may be old-fashioned, but I'll take a rocking chair any day over those straight chairs.
Mm-hmm. Isn't there something I could do for you, Mary? Isn't there something upstairs you'd like that I could get for you? Or some mending you'd like done? Or maybe an errand that I could run for you? Just to make up for this lovely day at your house.
You sit still. Come over here often. That's all you have to do.
You better not urge me. I'll be over here all the time.
Good.
I won't come over, however, next week when Linda's here. I don't want her to see the babies. You know, might upset her.
I don't think so, dear. I think the more Linda takes interest in children, gets used to the sight of other people's babies, the better it'll be for her. I think she'll enjoy the twins. But there's something you can do for me, though.
Well, thank goodness. What is it?
Run down to the mailbox. See if there are any letters stuck inside. I've got to open it. You know, I'm singularly disinterested in mail when my family are all home. That doesn't go for Peggy or Pepper.
I'd love to get the mail for you, dear. Mary, you know, your place looks so sweet now. Everything's growing and the roses beginning to open up. My, the ramblers are in bud. And the vegetables are coming up in leaps and bounds.
I'll soon have enough to send you over a mess. You can take some lettuce and spinach home if you want to, and some radishes. I think I'll have onions and carrots for you in a short while.
Oh, there's a letter here for Peggy. It's from Carter.
Oh, that's good. It's the first thing she looks for when she comes home.
I'll bring it up for you.
I'll keep it right here on the porch for her. Thank you, dear.
Oh, say, here comes some of your family, isn't it?
Oh.
Well, it's Sam and Peggy in the car. Hi, Peggy.
Hello, Nancy. Are the twins here?
Oh, I wish somebody'd be glad to see me for myself once in a while. Yes, they're here, Peggy.
They are, eh? Well, trot 'em out. Let's look 'em over.
Hello, Sam.
Hello, Nancy.
Oh, I've had the most heavenly, blissful day
Hello,
in your
Sam,
house.
darling. Hello, my baby.
Hello, Mama, dear. Is Pepper home yet?
No, not yet, dear.
I saw him this noon, Mama, and what do you think? He asked me to go to Lake Beauregard when Linda and he go up there. He thought it would be a good idea.
Oh, that's nice, Pegs. I think it's a wonderful idea.
I'm so excited about it. And I wanted to tell Pepper that I asked Mrs. Green for my vacation, and she's going to let me know about it. Oh, Mama, I do hope I'll get it. Because I just love Beauregard. And being there when Linda and Pepper are there will be such fun.
Oh, of course that'll be fun, dear. Oh, Peg's darling, here's a letter for you.
Oh, from Carter?
From Carter. Came this afternoon.
Oh, give it to me, Mama.
Say, where are the twins? I don't see them anywheres around. Or are they taking a stroll out of sight somewhere?
Well, I should say not, Sam. No, they're out in the kitchen having their supper in style with Hattie.
see.
You know, Sam, I've been here since noon. I just stopped over with the twins to pass the time of day, you know. We've stayed for lunch, a nap, and supper. At least they have.
Well, I wish you and Kurt would stay for dinner.
No, absolutely not, Mary. I'm taking them home the minute the crumbs are wiped off their faces and they finish their pudding. Oh, Sam, this is the nicest house to spend a day in the whole world.
Well, I can recommend it myself, Nancy.
I think you could.
Oh, Mama.
What? What's the matter, dear?
Carter's not going to stay on this side. He's going to be sent back overseas just as soon as they feel he's able to.
Oh, Peg, that's too bad.
But, Peggs, it's undoubtedly what Carter wants to do, isn't it?
Well, yes, Daddy. He says I mustn't feel too badly about it, that he's needed over there. But I hoped...
Well, he wants to finish the job, honey, and I don't blame him.
I know he does, Daddy, but I hoped there was a chance he might stay on this side. But he says they need him more overseas, and... Oh, dear, I just wish they'd stationed him here.
Oh, I know how you feel, Peg.
I was so sure he'd stay here if he could, and be stationed at some camp, and I could go down and join him there, and we could be married.
Yes, and he probably hoped the same thing, dear. And instead of feeling sorry, you should feel proud of him for getting back in harness as fast as he can.
I am proud of him, Daddy, only...
Yes, Peggs.
Oh, poor Peg. It's a terrible disappointment for her.
Of course it is. Why, it seems so sad for Carter to have to go back instead of staying here for a while.
But knowing Carter, I'm sure it's what he wants to do.
Yes, I suppose it is. Oh, Sam, if only this war would be over.
End of that.
Well, we're certainly doing our best to make that wish come true.
Yes.
Oh, hello, Mrs.
Hello, Edie. Hello, Edie. I didn't know you were back in Elmwood.
Yeah, I'm back, Mrs. Young.
Oh, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Mrs. Young, is Peggy home yet?
Yes, Edie, she just came in. She's gone to her room. She's a little upset.
What about, Miss Young?
Well, she just heard the Carter's going back overseas, and she so hoped that he'd be stationed here.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, I know how Peg must feel, Mrs. Young, but honestly, they need all of us they can get over there right now. As a matter of fact, I don't know when I'll get home again to Elmwood.
Andy.
I know, Edie, but there's a job to be done.
Yes, I understand, Andy. Really, I do. Mrs. Young, do you think I can go in to see Peggy? Do you think it'd be all right?
Why, yes, Edie, I guess so.
Okay. Excuse me, everybody.
Yes, how's Linda, Mrs. Young?
Oh, she's much better, Andy.
Oh, that's wonderful. We came over to find out the latest news about her.
Peggy! Woo-hoo-hoo! Oh, Peggy! Peggy, where are you? Peg! Oh, here you are in your room.
Oh, Edie, I wish you'd leave me alone for a little while, dear.
Huh?
I wish you hadn't come over just now. You know I don't want to be rude, Edie, but honestly, I don't feel like talking to anybody.
I know, Peggy. I know all about it. Your mother just told me about Carter going back across. Oh, Peggy, I'm terribly sorry. I know exactly how you feel.
Edie, you can't know exactly how I feel. Nobody can know how I feel unless they have somebody they love going overseas right now.
Well, that's just it, Peggy. I know exactly how you feel.
But, Edie, you don't. You couldn't.
Yes, I do, Peggy, because... Well, Peggy, I love somebody who's going overseas right away, too. Oh, I love him terribly.
You do? Who is it now, Edie?
Oh, Peggy, I'm so in love with Andy Hoyt, I don't know whether I'm coming or going.
Edie, are you really? Well, what about Andy?
Well, I think he loves me, too, Peggy. I think he loves me a lot. And so, you see, I do know just how you feel, because Andy has to go back pretty soon, too. And, oh, Peggy, I feel the same way about Andy as you do about Carter. I can't bear to have Andy go back this time. Oh, Peggy, isn't being in love with a soldier the hardest thing in the world, even while it's the best thing in the world? Even while you wouldn't be out of love with him for anything in the world.
Yes, Edie has put Peggy's thoughts into words more clearly than Peggy can herself. Being in love with a soldier is the hardest thing in the world, even while it's the best thing in the world. But neither Peggy nor Edie would be out of love with their soldiers for anything in the world. I'd like to ask you if this doesn't sound pretty reasonable to you. Since you do take baths and since you do use a soap, you might just as well use a soap that does something extra for you. Isn't that true? I'm talking about Camay, of course, because Camay does more than leave you wonderfully clean. It leaves you exquisitely clean and fresh, but then that extra something Camay gives you. It leaves your skin just touched with a hint of delicate, flower-like fragrance. You step from your bath fresh, dainty, and with just a suggestion of the very delicate, feminine fragrance no other soap but Camay can give you. So why not use it? Why shouldn't you use a soap that helps give you that dainty, truly feminine impression that's so attractive in a woman? And you'll enjoy using Camay. Turns your bath into a luxury of fluffy, creamy white lather. Thick, fragrant lather that will make any woman honestly enjoy her bath. And when you finally leave your Camay bath, your skin is as fresh, as beautifully clean as can be, and that extra something that only Camay can give you. Your skin is just touched with a hint of Camay's delicate, truly feminine fragrance. And you are a dainty, feminine woman, sure of your charm, sure of the impression you're making on nearly everyone who comes near you. Huckleberry pie is a special treat for the young family. What's the occasion? Edie's engagement to Andy Hoyt. And what is the reaction to the announcement? You just be sure to listen to Pepper Young's Family tomorrow. Remember, it's Camay, the mild beauty soap for a smoother, softer complexion that brings you Pepper Young's Family. Now, this is Alan Kent inviting you to listen again tomorrow. Have you done it yet? Have you gotten your family into the habit of making the soap you use last? Because remember, conserving soap is patriotic.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
The air marshals and generals had mapped out the air phase of the invasion. The kids I used to know at Kelly Field in San Antonio, among others, were the ones who made it succeed. And the story of this war can't be told properly until the story of certain civilians is told, such as those inside France who have been awaiting and fighting for liberation these last 4 years. Not much is known about what the French people have done to help the invasion so far. A good guess is that they're doing plenty. At least it's clear what side they're on. 9th Air Force flyers returned to England this afternoon to tell how French farmers and their families waved eagerly to the Allied flyers as they rounded up farming animals and herded them to places of safety. Today's story must include mention of that prototype of John Bull, Winston Churchill, who set the House of Commons cheering with his optimistic reports on the invasion's progress. It must include mention of Britain's King George, who unashamedly called his people to prayer. There was General Charles de Gaulle, one of the few important Frenchmen who wouldn't concede French defeat in his country's darkest hour, and who now is in England to watch the beginning of his homeland's liberation. But the important guys today were the G.I. Joes and their buddies on the sea and in the air, wearing the uniforms of America, Britain, and the countries which Hitler once foolishly thought he had conquered. And today's story must include mention of the people on this island, those people who were pledged by their Prime Minister 4 years ago last Sunday to fight on the beaches and the landing grounds and in the streets, but never surrender. They took today's news phlegmatically, but that's no criticism. The British people are by nature calm and rather sober-minded. Their coolness was one big reason that they stood while other nations were falling in 1940. And their ordeals in this war have been all the more sobering. They're tired, and tired people don't dance in the streets, even on D-Day. They probably won't even dance in the streets on Armistice Day. I studied the people of London both before and after the landings in France had been announced. The first glimpse was after Ed Murrow had phoned me and told me to get to such and such a building as soon as possible. I was positive immediately that D-Day had dawned, because the building to which Ed dispatched me was the building from which the big communique was to be issued. I set out as London was going to work, and the crowds I weaved through were composed of shop girls, businessmen, and a few whose garb suggested manual labor. They looked like just about any going-to-work crowd any place in the world: Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco. Some looked sleepy, some were quite brisk. Some were neatly dressed, and some were otherwise. There were white-lipped girls who apparently had got up too late to put on lipstick and intended to do so at their offices or shops. But the clothes they wore neatly or carelessly were of 1939 and 1940 vintage. The lipsticks the girls wore or neglected to wear was a hard, almost chalky substance, war stuff. And those who looked tired weren't suffering from lack of a full night's sleep. They reflected almost 5 years of labor in the front lines of war. I felt like yelling out, "It's happened. We've invaded Europe." Because what was started today is what these people have been working and fighting for since the bedraggled fugitives from Dunkirk staggered back to their homes 4 years ago this week. 3 or 4 hours later, when I went out into the streets of London again, I learned how the people would have reacted had I spilled the big secret with which I was bursting. They would have said, as many did say to me after communique number 1 had been broadcast, "That's good." And they would have said it, as they did say it later, very calmly and matter-of-factly. They wouldn't have appeared jubilant, but as a policeman said to me tonight, they were jubilant inside. I return you now to CBS in New York.
Columbia's news headquarters in New York once again. It's time now to pause for station identification. I just want to take this opportunity to assure all of you, our listeners, that we are remaining on the air at this point and indefinitely continuing our invasion coverage. And I want also to remind the station staffs at our affiliated stations around the country that we are continuing in 30 seconds after the signal which I shall now give. This is Bob Trout speaking in New York. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. Columbia's news headquarters in New York, Bob Trout speaking. We've heard from our Columbia correspondent in London, Charles Shaw, just before we paused for station identification. And now we are going to go to Washington to hear a Columbia correspondent in Washington, Joseph C. Harsh, who has seen the cities of Berlin and the cities of Washington both during the war. He is going to compare these two wartime capitals for us. So now to Washington, Joseph C. Harsh reporting.
The task of a commanding general ceases when the battle begins. He does the training and the planning for that battle. Once it has been joined, it is up to the field commanders and to the men at the front to carry through. If he has done his job of planning and preparing as well as he can, he waits for the outcome with sober confidence. That, in effect, is the atmosphere of Washington tonight. This is the city where, more than in any one other, the shape of today's great events was formed. It might be well to recall this fact that the invasion of the continent of Europe is a professional American military plan. Long before there was any demand raised for it from Russia or by Russia's friends, the top generals and admirals of our own American forces had concluded that the only way to defeat Germany in such a war as this was by frontal assault. If the Russian promptings had any influence, it was when the spokesmen of the three powers sat down to make the final decisions. The Russian vote with the American carried the day for the concept of going to meet the enemy in front where he was strong and where the road lay straight to his heart, not around by the back door, which may have seemed easier to some, but which also meant the longer time and the longer strain, and with uncertainty at the end of the long prospect. This, then, is the city which bred the plan, and this is the city where the means to make it effective were formulated and delivered in blueprint to American industry. How nearly perfectly the job has been done remains to be seen, and perhaps remains to be argued in future years. But it has been done as well as Washington and the American system of government could do it. The men have been provided in the full strength which our leaders considered necessary. They have been given all the training our armed forces knew how to give them. Unquestionably, the best training American troops have ever had. And they have been given superlative equipment produced by an industrial miracle of the ages. All this Washington has done. So today, when the news came, it could only sit back and pray earnestly that it had been done well enough. The reaction here was untinged by any false hopes or unwarranted assumptions. No promises of easy or a sure victory have ever been permitted to come out here, and they are not felt. No one knows what the result will be. They only know that a great and well-trained and well-equipped force has been set in motion, and that if it all goes even moderately well, its efforts should be crowned with success. It knows enough now from 2.5 years of war not to jump to any quick conclusions. Making a landing is only the first move in the invasion. Washington has learned how to wait for such a move to develop, as it must slowly in its own due course. Thus it waited today, with intense interest, with burning hope, with confidence, but without illusions. One can only wonder how different the atmosphere must be tonight in the city where this war was planned quite another way, in Berlin. We know how it was there when things were going Hitler's way, before Pearl Harbor brought Washington into play as the antagonist in this great struggle. As one of the American correspondents who was there when we were still neutral, I can describe it then. It was a city where the leaders were arrogantly and completely confident of success. It was also a city where the people at first doubted and then believed when the first victories rolled in. I remember the grandstands which went up in the heart of Berlin at the time of the fall of France and were left standing all during the fall and early winter of 1941 because the Germans thought Britain would surrender under the punishment of the Luftwaffe. Finally, when Hitler realized that he would have to fight Russia, the stands came down and the people began to doubt and worry again. What has happened since then we can only conjecture from limited evidence. From the Swiss border we get stories today that the German people were shocked and bewildered and angered this morning by the news that Allied landings had been made successfully in France. We can't build much speculation on such evidence. The neutrals around Germany have been the channels too often for the transmission of distorted or even deliberately false versions of what is happening inside Germany. But this one has some of the earmarks of credibility. All the information we have received from inside Germany bears out one central conclusion, that Berlin has indulged dangerously in confident predictions about the strength of the German West Wall. The recurring doubts of the German people have been kept down by the picture of a Western barrier which could never be broken. Berlin has ceased to promise its people victory, but it has promised a draw which would be won by failure of the invasion. The invasion has not yet succeeded, but its opening move has gained a foothold on the French coast. I can well believe that this has come as a bitter shock to a people conditioned to expect a different result. This in itself could explain why Berlin propaganda, which began this morning by exaggerating the extent of our penetrations, veered around towards the end of the day to extravagant claims of successful German countermeasures. Washington is not plagued and fettered today by false promises. In all probability, Berlin tonight is caught up in the trap of its own web of falsehoods. We return you now to New York.
Back at Columbia's news headquarters in New York, we have a dispatch from Atlanta tonight which tells us that the Air Force's Materiel Command has promised that as the invasion of Europe progresses, new weapons will be poured into the attack. Jet propulsion fighters are on the way, super-flying fortresses, rocket guns, and other equally as fantastic but real, the command said. And the district supervisor in Atlanta, Colonel R.W. Probst, tells us that the full story cannot yet be told, but American parents who have sons in the thick of the fighting in France and elsewhere can be assured that the equipment furnished them gives them the best possible chance for victory and survival. And that brings us to the point on how the United States has received the news that D-Day has at last come and is indeed almost 24 hours old by now. Ned Calmer of Columbia of CBS World News, is here in our Columbia News headquarters in New York with a piece on how the news was received in the United States. And now here is Ned Calmer.
Historically, D-Day has been one of the most important days Americans have ever lived. But like the British, we're learning to take this war in our stride. In most American cities today, you wouldn't have noticed anything much out of the ordinary in the everyday look of the streets and the faces of American men and women. We made no show of our emotions. But nearly every one of us, by now, has a personal stake in the action on the battlefront. If not a member of the immediate family, then a relative or a close friend. And it was the thoughts of those men who are doing the fighting, while we sit safe at home, that dominated most of us today as we went about our routine activities. That's why President Roosevelt's most solemn talk of 2 hours ago, his radio address in which he led the country in prayer for divine help in our enterprise of arms, has proved the keynote of this invasion day. Its measured tones, the hushed solemnity of the occasion, were the true import of what D-Day meant for us all. So it wasn't a day of rejoicing, but a day of quiet pride and confidence that the sacrifices Americans are making on the battlefront shall not be made in vain. It was a day of church-going, and many American communities called public gatherings to commemorate the day in this vein. A great mass assembly was held in New York City. Conspicuously absent from these unfestive meetings were the war workers who are making the guns that our men are carrying into action in France. D-Day was a day of full wartime pressure for the American industrial machine. Baseball games were called off. Racetracks shut down. Some newspapers carry no advertising tonight in order to give full coverage to the invasion. At West Point today, a great cheer went up at the graduation exercises. This was because a boy named John Eisenhower was receiving his diploma. His mother, the wife of the invasion chief, was asleep like millions of other Americans when the general issued his historic communique number 1 announcing that the invasion had begun. And when the girl reporter gave her the news, Mrs. Eisenhower got her voice under control and then said, "Why didn't somebody tell me?"
That was Ned Calmer telling us about how America has received the news that D-Day has come and, as a matter of fact, has now gone. Here's a brief dispatch from London dated Wednesday. Prime Minister Winston Churchill promises a new statement in the House of Commons today, that's Wednesday, on overnight developments in the Allied invasion of France. It's now revealed that between his 2 statements, which he made in 2 appearances at the House of Commons yesterday, Tuesday, the Prime Minister flew to the motor caravan from which General Eisenhower is directing the invasion somewhere in rural England. You know, sometime earlier during Tuesday, the Brazzaville radio broadcast that General Eisenhower had established headquarters in France, but that has subsequently been denied, and here it is denied again in this brief dispatch from London, saying that the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, has flown to the motor caravan from which General Eisenhower is directing the invasion somewhere in rural England. Those of you who stayed with us all during last night's broadcast, which began shortly after midnight and continued until 10 o'clock in the morning, New York time, will remember that we got some very interesting news from Prime Minister Churchill in his appearances at the House of Commons. We got some of the most specific details and the freshest news that we had on the invasion up to that point, and now we are told that on Wednesday morning in England, the Prime Minister will make a new statement in the House of Commons on overnight developments. Meanwhile, to sum up the situation as briefly as possible, we can remember that at 10 o'clock Eastern Wartime, the President, in his broadcast in Washington, said, "The invasion is a success so far." And about 30 minutes later, Columbia's correspondent Edward R. Murrow, speaking from London, summed it up by saying, "A brilliant beginning." And now, here at our news headquarters in New York, is William L. Shirer, who is here to discuss for us for a few moments German generals whom our Allied troops in northern France are now facing. Here's Mr. Shirer.
Just a word about the German commanders in charge of the armies whom General Eisenhower's forces are facing on the beaches of France tonight. General Eisenhower's opposite number is Field Marshal von Rundstedt. He's 69 years old,
and the oldest of the top German generals. Thus, he is 18 years older than General Eisenhower. On the other hand, he is undoubtedly the best general Hitler has. I learned something about him when covering the German armies first in Poland and then later in the German drive through Holland, Belgium, and France just 4 years ago this month. In the Polish campaign in September 1939, von Rundstedt commanded the German Army Group South that swept through southern Poland and sealed the doom of the Polish army in a little over a week's time. The next spring in the West, the spring of 40, he made even a more amazing record. As commander of the German Army Group A in the center of the Western Front, it was von Rundstedt who achieved the now famous breakthrough across the Meuse River to the seacoast that split the Anglo-French armies and brought on their disaster. In Russia, von Rundstedt commanded the so-called Army Group South, which swept through the Ukraine in the early part of the war. The Russians considered von Rundstedt the outstanding German commander opposing them. But he did meet his match in Russia, and now he is matched against General Eisenhower. The other two top German generals facing us in the invasion now are Marshal Rommel, the over-publicized leader of the Axis forces in Africa, and Marshal Blaskowitz, the latter a comparatively unknown general, at least in this country. General Blaskowitz, actually, is one of the team of German generals who made a big name for himself in Germany during the Polish and French campaigns. As commander-in-chief of the Eastern Military District in Poland, it was he who helped plan the German invasion of Russia, and he took a very prominent part in the early part of that war. In von Rundstedt and Blaskowitz, if not in Rommel, the Allied commanders are up against two of Germany's best generals. But as one who saw them operate in Poland and then in the West, I imagine that they are not as confident now as they were then. For one thing, the opposition is quite a different thing now, and so are their own once unbeatable forces.
That was William L. Shara here at our news headquarters in New York, discussing German generals. And now Columbia's military analyst, Major George Fielding Elliott, has a rather similar piece to discuss this evening. Major Elliott is going to talk about German defenses. Here is Major Elliott.
During the past hour or two, we have received two dispatches dated the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force about the defenses of the coast of France, the so-called Atlantic Wall. It seems that the Germans, in planning their beach defenses, left by necessity rather than by design a number of fundamental weak spots. The spots are rather stretches of beach between the strongly fortified major seaports. And that particular stretch across which the Americans drove into France today and their British comrades were selected many months ago as the best point of attack. But only recently did the Germans seriously start to build up the defenses there, and the attack found these defenses far less heavily gunned and the defenses themselves far less well built up than the great port areas, such, for example, as the Elbe and Weser estuaries, the Hook of Holland, and in France, the ports of Dunkirk, Calais, Boulogne, Dieppe, and Le Havre, and St. Malo, Brest, Lorient, Nantes, and Bordeaux, all of which are large seaports and are very heavily fortified. It is, of course, to be realized that a seaport, a well-equipped seaport, is one of the objectives that an invading force will seek to attain as soon as possible. To all indications, the Allies took advantage of the German failure to fortify the stretch between Le Havre and Cherbourg. It remained almost without beach obstacles, and the inshore defenses were nothing like as massive as those stretching for many miles on either side. This left a breach of about 60 miles between the northern wing of the defenses, which ended at Le Havre, and the southern chain, which began at Cherbourg. It was the Germans, in erecting their defenses, had to erect them just as we've had to do many things on a system of priorities. On the French coast, they erected their heaviest defenses on the French side of the Straits of Dover, where the distance to England is shortest, and where perhaps, therefore, they felt they had the most reason to expect attack. Second priority was given to the Seine estuary of the port of Le Havre and to the port of Cherbourg. Other areas were developed to a lesser extent and at a later date. The low priority, which kept materials and weapons away from this Cherbourg-Le Havre area and made it, so to speak, the Achilles heel of the Nazi defenses, was due largely to the urgent necessity for protecting the seaports first, and also to the general German lack of manpower, transportation, and supplies necessary if they were to create a continuous wall along the coast of France or on the coast of Western Europe from Denmark to Spain. Week by week through the winter, Allied reconnaissance showed the slow progress in converting scattered houses and villages into strong points, and Allied fingers were kept crossed as the Germans again and again showed marked signs of nervousness about this spot or that, but never seemed to get around to really fortifying this particular chosen stretch. Not until Field Marshal Rommel's first extensive Western inspection in February last did the enemy show increased interest in these invitingly bare beaches and river estuaries. Even then, he gave first attention to multiplying minefields in the immediate inshore areas, to lengthening and deepening anti-tank ditches close to the waterline, to emplacement of light guns to fire along the beaches, and to general improvement of the deeper defenses. Only after the winter storms had blown out along toward the middle of April did the four commonest types of offshore beach obstacles begin to appear. They were thick along our target areas, although still not as numerous as at many other points. But of course, when it comes to attacking a fortified port, a place such as Cherbourg or Le Havre, we shall find rather a different situation. We'll find the entire region guarded by belts of wire, plus anti-tank ditches up to 65 feet wide in the vicinity of the important towns and crossroads, strongholds, and batteries. Minefields have been laid up to a depth of more than 1,000 yards behind the shore, and some areas have been inundated, and most of the important roads have been mined. Fields have been strewn with posts, barbed wire, and garnished with anti-personnel mines to prevent landings from the air. And inside the important towns, the Germans have fortified buildings and constructed trenches and splinter-proof shelters behind the harbor areas for distances of 1 to 3 miles. However, we should not be overly impressed with these purely material defenses. After all, what counts is the men behind them, men in sufficient numbers and with sufficient weapons and ammunition to defend these fortifications, which otherwise are simply obstacles which can be bypassed or gotten over. And the great German difficulty is a difficulty of manpower and of distribution of what manpower they have. So that if a great port like Cherbourg, for example, were to be cut off from all supplies, its garrison isolated, so that reinforcements could not reach it, it would not be the defenses themselves which would stop our troops from capturing it as long as they had the superior power and the superior strength to do so. And now, here again is Bob Trout.
That was Major George Fielding Elliott, Columbia's military analyst, speaking to you from our Columbia News headquarters here in New York. I have a few dispatches which have come in and which I'm going to give you in a few seconds, but before I do, I'd like to remind all of you who are listening tonight that in approximately 3 minutes, that is at 12:30 Eastern Wartime, we who are on duty here at Columbia's News headquarters are going to take a brief intermission from our news coverage. Of course, we're remaining on duty at our microphones, and here in the newsroom, we shall interrupt any programs to bring you late news that comes in, and we shall be back, even if no late news does come in, to keep you up to date with summaries and dispatches direct from Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force. I merely wanted to tell you that we are taking that brief intermission at 12:30 Eastern Wartime, but to remind you to keep tuned to your Columbia station for the continuing invasion coverage. A dispatch that comes by way of London tells us that the German Transocean Agency says today that the Allies have made further landings at the mouth of the Orne River under cover of naval artillery. That's the German Transocean Agency broadcast that's reported to us from London. Here we have a brief indication of how bad the weather has been in the Channel. You know, we've heard from a good many correspondents now who have accompanied the forces who made the landing, telling about the rising winds and the choppy sea in the Channel. United Press war correspondent Robert Miller, who covered the first phase of the invasion from a PT boat, enclosed this note to his editor with one batch of copy that he sent in. He said, "Sorry about the messy copy, but written aboard rolling PT. Sure could use some seasick pills and liniment, plus a good pair of spurs." That's the latest indication of the state of the weather in the English Channel. So far, it has not interrupted our steady stream of supplies, but there's no doubt that everyone would feel a good bit easier if the weather would definitely let up and become very pleasant. Columbia Shortwave Listening Station here in New York has heard a BBC broadcast telling that the 1st Royal Air Force Beach Squadron has gone ashore on the French invasion coast to pave the way for a steady flood of Royal Air Force personnel who from now on will operate from the French side of the Channel. These beach squadrons have the difficult job of bringing supplies to the spot, and BBC reminds us it's no easy matter, for it takes 24 tons of oil and gasoline to keep 12 Spitfires in the air for only 4 or 5 sorties. That is from a BBC broadcast which was heard here in New York by Columbia's shortwave listening station. And now we are about to interrupt our coverage temporarily. We'll be back on the air frequently during the night, however. This is Bob Trout speaking from Columbia's news headquarters in New York. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. And here's a jaunty bit of jive in both title and theme. Buddy DeVito sings it, You Send Me.
Send me right out of this world. You send me. You give me that kick I never knew. You send me. You're letting me know I'm living. Who wouldn't be living, loving you? When people shout, hey there, come out of that cloud, I just want to stay there, satisfied and starry-eyed, 'cause you sent me right out of this world. But darling, there's one thing I hope you never do. Don't ever send me away from you. When people shout, hey there, come out of that cloud, I just want to stay there, satisfied and starry-eyed, 'cause you sent me right out of this world. But darling, there's one thing I hope you never do. Don't ever send me